Okay, we are going to start the lunchtime live stream. It is part 2 of the Peppermint Magazine free sewing pattern, the ruffle sleeve top, as done by In the Folds Patterns. And we have a lot to finish up. So let's head over to the cutting table, and I want you to grab your sleeve pieces. So you have a couple of ruffles pieces, and then you have the sleeves. Now, if we were following the directions, we'd be at around step 12. However, I am going to do this a little different than they have it. And I think it's just a little bit easier because it's all going to be flat versus trying to put the sleeve in and trying to put like the ruffle in on the round and all of that. So trust me when I say this will be a little easier. Let me know if you can't hear me or anything. I think it's good and working correctly. I'm doing it slightly different this week. So if anything seems weird technically, feel free to put it in the chat. Okay, first up, let's take the ruffle pieces. And if you have an iron nearby, you can grab that. But if you don't, you can do it the way I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do 2 half-inch folds, and I'm going to pin as I go. And you can pin for this kind of thing. I will pin it lengthwise just because it's a little bit easier. Yeah. I think normally I would tell you to pin, and if you want to, you can. I would normally tell you to pin like that. Actually, you know what? I will pin like that. It's just you've got to go in and out quicker, which can be a little bit more challenging, but let's do it the right way because then when you're sewing it, it's super easy to pull the pins out. All right, so I'm going to actually skip over here, do the half-inch folds, stick some pins in and kind of meet in the middle. And stick some more pins in. And I'm going to do that on both of these ruffle pieces. So all I'm doing is hemming the this part of the sleeve. It's just a lot easier to do when it hasn't been gathered. And then once it's hemmed, we can gather it and attach it to this sleeve part, which is this part here. Okay. So here we go. We've got that pinned, and I'm going to do exactly the same thing with the other piece. Folding 2 half-inch folds and pinning those. All right. Switch over to here. And like I said, if you've got the iron nearby, you can always just press this. And then you probably won't even have to pin, but you can also just pin. Okay, so I'm going to sew those, and I'm going to sew those on this inner edge. So, any luck, I will be able to show you that on the sewing machine, at least in a half screen. We'll see if that works. Oh, it's working. How exciting. There we go. Okay, so I'm sliding and under. No, I'm caught. There we go. And I'll grab my other one. Don't forget to backstitch at the end. And then I will take these over back to the, okay. And the next step is going to be gathering. So we need to gather the bottom, the top of this ruffle. We need to gather it so that it shrinks up and fits onto, so we can sew it to this upper part of the sleeve. So what we're going to do is along here, I'm going to do a row of basting stitches, which means I'm going to turn the stitch length up to the highest it can go on my machine. And I'm going to do a row of stitching about 1/4 inch from the edge, no back stitching. And then I'm going to do another row right next to it, making sure I don't cross my lines of stitching. And we're going to use those to gather up the fabric so that we can sew it to the sleeve piece. Okay. So let me go over to the sewing machine. Find your stitch length, and mine's going to go up to 6.0. And a little bit, scooch over here. There we go. And you'll see it's going to start to do these giant stitches, but that's what you want. And just go all the way across. Might even start to gather slightly without you even doing anything, which is good. Pull it off, don't backstitch. And do the same thing right next to it. It can be to the right of it or to the left of it, doesn't matter, whichever is more comfortable for you. But don't let them cross. This might go a little bit slower. The stitch length is still gigantic. Okay. My cutter is not working. when I cut it, I still want a nice long tail. So be mindful of that. Okay. I'm going to go back to gathering. If I turn this off, you'll see it bigger. Okay. So I'm going to remove one of these sleeves too. And let's see. You basically want to, if I can get it a little closer, find both of the either bottom or the top, but you need to grab, like I'll grab my back threads that are hanging. So I'm going to grab both of them. There we go. And now I've got them in my right hand, and I'm going to gently start to pull. And what that'll do is pull the fabric along that thread. But we've got to make sure that it goes all the way to the other side because we want our ruffles to be even. So I just keep pulling a little bit and then distributing it all the way to the end. And then see how we're doing as far as length. I think I could go slightly shorter. And then now that I've got the right length, we have to work on getting it to be even. So I'm going to kind of hold it here so it doesn't let any more thread go, and try and move my gathers to make them more even. And this is kind of an eyeball thing, so it can be tough, but do your best. And once it's on there, you're not going to be able, you know, to see if it's super uneven. Like I feel like there's a lot of ruffles right here. So I'll try to break that up a little. Okay. I think that's pretty decent. So then we've got to take the ruffle and flip it so it's right sides together. So I'm going to do it this way. So I can start here and very gently, so none of your gathers move, line up the raw edges together and pin them. That was a really bent pin. And then it should hopefully, what I like to do is go right to the end and make sure that is together. I'll stick a pin and then kind of distribute what's left here. And I'm adjusting the ruffled or the gathered part so that the raw edge is right on the raw edge of the sleeve. Right here. Okay, so that is all pinned together. I'm going to move over to the sewing machine and start that. Okay, let's see here. So I've got the edge of my foot lined up with the edge of the fabric. However, once I've got that, I'm kind of like in between the two gathering stitches. So a really easy way, I want to make sure that I'm to the left of the gathering stitches so I don't see them. If you wind up seeing them, it's not a big deal. You can take them out, but you can move your needle over in the left position, and then I can still have the presser foot at the raw edge, but just have my needle moved over. And then also don't forget to put your stitch length back to normal. I'm to the left of my gathering, which is exactly what I want. And I use my fingers to sort of like press the gathers down as I go. Take your time. Okay. All right, the moment of truth. Let's see what this looks like. I'll head back over. Not super gathered, right? It's just some gentle gathering, but that looks pretty good. And then now you're going to fold that whole sleeve in half and pin this side together. So start at the middle where that seam is, put those together, and then your hemmed edge should go together pretty well too. I'll just turn this off and start to pin it. And I'll stick one right in the middle, seam to seam, and then one up here. Okay, so that's looking like a cute little ruffle sleeve, isn't it? Like the name says, ruffle sleeve top. All right, so I'm going to sew the edge here that I've pinned with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And then hopefully if you're sewing along with me, you have pressed the neck edge. Mine's pressed for the most part. And the other thing that I did is I pinned the armhole, okay? Because we have that facing in there and I wanted to pin the facing to the outside armhole. So they're all lined up seam to seam, seam to seam. And I'm actually going to baste my armhole before I stick my sleeve in. So basically this is going to go in there. So let's first sew the sleeve. Doesn't really matter which end you start with, but just make it consistent. Okay, my needle position's all the way over. I'm going to put it back in the center. So and then now I've got the sleeve. So I'm actually going to turn that sleeve right side out. The sleeves are symmetrical, I think, for the most part. Yeah. So it really doesn't matter which one goes in which armhole. But one thing I want to point out, see, and then we since we hemmed the ruffle already, we already have a finished sleeve, which is kind of nice. Like if you decide you want it to be shorter, you can always hem it later. But I kind of like to hem it first while it's flat. It just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, so I wanted to point out, we've got our armhole. We've got, see if I can raise that up a little. We've got the sleeve. The sleeve is a lot bigger than the armhole. So we need to gather the top of the sleeve, okay? So it doesn't really matter. I don't tend to, it might say in the pattern where you're supposed to gather it, but in general, if you just kind of gather the top part of it, the top part of the shoulder, just make sure it's even. So what I'm trying to say is, let's say if we put a pin here, we're going to put a pin on the exact same side opposite, okay? And then we're going to gather in between the pins, okay? So just make sure when you do your other sleeve, you're gathering the same amount, okay? So I'm just doing one sleeve today for the sake of time. So I'm going to gather from pin to pin, and it's the same thing. You're going to do 2 lines of basting stitches from pin to pin, no back stitching, and just do the basting stitches really close to the edge, about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then right next to it. Okay, so back over to the machine. And stitch length is up to the highest it goes. My machine sews in place a couple times before it gets going, but that's okay. Giant basting stitches until get to the other pin. Don't back stitch, leave yourself a nice long tail, grab your pinking shears, whatever's handy, just kidding, don't grab your pinking shears, mine just happen to be right here, and snip your thread, leaving a nice long tail, okay? And then same thing right next to it. And this one is the one that I go a little slower. Stopping where the other one stopped. Lift your needle. Oh, what's happening? There we go. And nice long tail. Okay. Alrighty, I'm gonna move the shirt and get a head-on view of what we need to gather here. So find your thread tails and grab the 2 back tails on one side. And without my hands getting in the way, I'm gonna try and pull the 2. When you're pulling this, you've gotta be really gentle and don't use old thread. Use pretty new thread, because if that thread breaks while you're gathering, it's really frustrating because you've got to go back and do it again. You don't want these tails of your threads to break. So use good new thread and be gentle. So I'm evenly distributing, and I'm sort of guessing about how gathered the sleeve needs to be. So let's see, I've got a nice gather going. Let's hold it up to, and the cool thing about gathering is you can kind of guess how much to gather it. And then once it's in there and being pinned, if it's too gathered, you can always pull it apart to make it fit the armhole. So that's looking I don't know, just about where I want it. Not bad. So I'm going to set that aside. And then, like I said, I'm going to baste my armhole first. So I'm going to leave it on the largest stitch. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to put it back at like a regular size stitch because I feel like if I baste this, it's going to gather it a little bit. So let's turn the sewing machine camera on and pull off the little part that allows you to have the free arm. When you baste this, I want it to be a really small seam allowance. So I'm gonna make the needle go to the right. And I'm stitching the facing and the outside fabric of this armhole together. And this is only to make it easier to sew the sleeve on. This isn't necessary, but I think it is a helpful thing to do. And I'm just adjusting as I go. And it doesn't matter if I backstitch. I want to show you something. So this is my pet peeve when I teach people, when they sit there and put a pile of pins, especially kids. They put this pile of pins, and this is exactly what I've done. So I just wanted to tattle on myself there for a minute. I really need a pin cushion on this sewing machine, so I don't do that. Oh, well, nobody's perfect. All right. Move that around. Let's get that sewing machine camera back. Okay. All right, so let me find the basted armhole. Now, the next thing is going to be turning the shirt inside out so that I can put the sleeve in. So you want, when you're putting a sleeve in, you want to have the bodice of what you're sewing or the armhole of what you're sewing to be inside out. And then the sleeve is going to be backwards when you stick it in and right side out. Okay, so it's a little confusing, but at the end of the day, you want to have the right side of your sleeve touching the right side of your shirt. So that's why the whole shirt has to be inside out. Okay, I always start at the bottom and match seam to seam. Okay, so I'm going to stick a pin right there. And I'm going to work my way up the right side and up the left side. And the last thing I'm going to pin is that top gathered part. So I want to pin up until the gathering starts. So basically that will, you know, that will have no gathers and all of the fabric will just be flat on each, on, you know, flat together until the gathering. So like right to there. Stick one more pin here. And then same thing on this side. Seem to have a little bit more fabric sticking out. So I'm not going to match up the edges perfectly. Actually, you know what I'll do is I'll try this at home, folks. Just going to cut a little bit off. Okay. Pin those raw edges together. So when you sew this, it's not going to be a finished edge on the inside. So you can always go back, and if you have a serger, you can serge it. If you want to zigzag over it, go for that. If you wanted to put a binding on it, whatever, or if you want to leave it, no judgments whatsoever. It might fray when you wash it, but I've said it before, I have had plenty of pieces of clothing that I have no finishing on the inside and it's woven. So do what works for you. Okay, so now I have the remainder, and this is the armhole and this is the gathering. So the gathering was a little bit too much gathering. So I'm actually going to spread it out and then make sure it's even. That looks pretty good. But you'll see you kind of adjust it so that sleeve fits in the armhole pretty close to perfectly. And then pin. I was just glancing at the comments. I'm so glad you guys are enjoying it. And yes, Rachel, I think you were talking about the basting when I basted the facing and the shirt together. Yes, because I wanted to have those. And that's what makes this step so much easier. If these weren't basted, you'd worry that like something wasn't aligned correctly when you're pinning it onto the sleeve. And by basting it together beforehand, you just know it's like one less thing to worry about, in my opinion. So there is the sleeve all pinned in. Fits pretty well. Hopefully it fits my arm. Oh, I just put that back on and I do not want it on. Let me show you what I'm doing. Okay, so that piece is going to go right on the free arm right there. So move it over, make sure you can see what's happening. And here we go. Okay, my needle's all the way over in the left-hand position, so I'm gonna move it over to the right. And if you don't have the ability to move your needle back and forth, just change how you position the fabric. That's all. And you can use a different reference point. If you wanted to use the reference point of one of the lines, you make the fabric line up with a line, and then you know you have roughly a 5/8 inch seam allowance, which is what I'm kind of going for here. Oh, that's way too big. Hold on. There we go. And again, I'm piling up my pins. Bad, Megan. Okay. One thing I wanted to mention here is when you're stopping to adjust, put your needle down if you remember. I don't always remember, but I'm going to try. So I'll sew like a little bit, make sure my needle's down before I adjust everything. And you're always checking to see too that you're not sewing something that you shouldn't. Make sure it's literally only the shirt and the sleeve. 3 layers of fabric here. Oh yeah, so it's the shirt, the facing, and the sleeve. 3 layers of fabric. Needle down. And it's a big circle. So just come back to where you started. And backstitch there. Okay. And this is always an exciting part of sewing. Once you sew that gathered sleeve on, it's always fun to make sure it all looks okay. So what am I doing? I'm turning the shirt right side out. Ooh, looks pretty good. I kind of love this fabric. And it's finally almost spring here, I think. So this will be a good spring top. I've got my gathering stitches all hanging over here. So I'll cut some of those. And there is the sleeve with some beautiful gathering at the top. And then look, you can see there I do show some of my gathering stitches, so you can grab little scissors and get in there and carefully snip them if you want. Kind of like I'm doing here. And then just pull them out. I'll do that later. But there is the sleeve. How are we doing on time? Okay, we have 20 minutes left. Awesome. You know what? I think we have time to do the other sleeve real quick. No, let's wait. I want to finish it up. We need to put on the hem on the bottom, which is pretty simple. But I am going to turn it back inside out. Okay. So when I first start to hem the bottom of a top or a dress, I kind of check to see how even it is. And it appears my one side, there's a little bit of discrepancy here. So I'm gonna just, that one's okay. This side is actually okay. This one, I did actually fix the dart. Like I said, I was gonna do last week. My dart was a little bit off and there was a bigger discrepancy, but I fixed my dart and I still have a little bit of a discrepancy. So here's what I do. I just sort of like cut and then head to the bottom. It's just like a really gradual cut, but I don't want to take too much off. I want to get rid of the discrepancy and let it kind of flow into the bottom of the shirt. Okay. So, you know, it's obviously nothing that's crazy precise, but I'm not a crazy precise sewer. Never will claim to be that. Okay, here we go. I haven't tried it on. I don't know what the length is on it. I'm just going to trust that I don't want it too much shorter. So I'm going to do 2 half-inch folds around the same size as the sleeves. And I'm going to stick the pins in, and I'm going to be good. And I'm going to stick the pins in vertically. And I'm going to do the same thing. Here, I'll grab some of these pins that I've piled up that I like to do, and that's skip around, not just pin and go in order. I like to find different spots on the bottom and pin them and then kind of meet in the middle. And I find that this allows for a straighter or a non-twisted hem on like a dress or a skirt or a top. Okay. And let's see. I'll kind of skip over to here. And just every so often spot check to make sure that when you're meeting in the middle, it's level. The fold is, for the most part, level. Again, it's nothing that's perfect, but it's just fine for what we're doing. And here where I've got this side seam allowance, I'm just putting them together. You could spread them apart if you wanted to, but I feel like because of how I have them at the top, I'm going to keep them folded to the one side. Fold it up. I did that one the opposite way. It just felt a little more natural. And a couple more pins. All right, let me get the back real quick. I'm gonna go right in the middle. And then work my way in. That looks too big. Can you hear Adam whispering? I don't know who's watching. No, there's a few people watching. My husband just walked in the door. He says hello. And the last part of it right here. Gosh, I feel like that took forever. Okay. Head over to the sewing machine and we'll do the hem. Move these pins so I don't knock them all on the floor. And place it on here. And on this one, I'm just going to pay attention to my needle, sewing right along that folded edge the best I can. And if your sewing machine sews better, the stitch is better on the side that's up, you can always just flip it and feel where the folded edge is. But I'll just do it where I can see the folded edge. Okay. Where is my pin cushion? There it is. back to where I started. And we've got a hem. So exciting. Okay, we have 14 minutes left. And that means that I can put the other sleeve on. Yes, indeed. So here is the sleeve. I think I'm gonna actually finish something in the live stream today. Very exciting. Okay, so here is the edge that we need to gather. I'm just gonna leave the sewing machine view on so I can go back and forth. Change the stitch length up to 6. See, this is where I'm gonna make all the mistakes because I'm gonna rush. I'll try not to rush. Off, snip, and second row of gathering. Pull that off. Grab my tails of my threads on the back or the front, wherever you can grab them easiest. I'm caught. Okay. I'm gonna hold the back ones, I think. Yeah, there we go. Okay. I'm going to gather. Try to make it all the way to the other side. Oh my gosh, I gathered like super far from the edge. So I might be pulling out gathering stitches later, so that's fine. Even that out. That looks pretty good. Maybe a little more. Okay. So then we put right sides facing, matching up the raw edge, pin together. And then I'm gonna get end to end right here. Gathers are a little flat over here, so I'm just gonna kind of pretend I'm gonna create some gathers and just pin them. We'll be fine. Okay. So I'm going to sew this together. I'm not going to worry about sewing to the left of the gathering because my gathering is so far from the edge, but you'll see I'll just be able to pull that gathering out and they'll stay. So over to the sewing machine, switch this back to 3.0 for my machine. My fingers to press the gathers. We're going a little wild at the end here. All right, let's see here. Pretty good. But like I said, you can see those gathering stitches, so I'll take those out later. Fold it in half, right sides facing. Start by matching the seam here. I'm gonna divide my seam allowances, have one go up, have one go down. Pin, and then my hemmed edge of my sleeve is together. You really want to make sure that folded edge lines up nice, or it's super noticeable if you don't. And then a couple more here. So this edge, and we've got a sleeve. All right, now I did not measure where I gathered the other sleeve. So again, I'm gonna just take a look at my other one and see if I can estimate. Basically, I want to estimate how much is not gathered because you can't measure the gathered because it's gathered. So I can kind of guesstimate how much is not by lining that up. Let's see how it goes like from here to here is gathered. I put a pin here, and then I think I'll fold it again. Make sure it's even on the other side. Okay, so now I'm going to gather my sleeve from pin to pin. Putting this back up to stitch length of 6. And this time I'll stay a little closer to the edge. Stay on the fabric. I did, don't worry. Nice long tail. Start at the same spot. Of course, I'm about to run out of bobbin. Off, nice long tail, and estimate how much to gather here. Grab a hold of my tails of my threads and start to pull. Okay, so that one's not pulling, and that's because my machine does that weird thing where it sews in place. So that just means I will go to the other side. You've always got 2 options. That one's not really pulling either. I think I'll go back to this option. What about if I pull the front ones? Ah, there we go. Usually with such a short space to gather, I can always find something. Okay, let's say that much. So remember, we turn the sleeve right side out, but the shirt remains inside out. And we find the armhole. We're inside out right now. Okay, cool. There's my armhole. This is the shoulder. This is the armpit. Open up that armhole. then stick it in backwards. So raw edges line up and right sides are together. Starting with the side seam in the armpit. Line up those seams, pin them together. I'm not basting. Oh, I didn't baste my armhole here. I'm gonna live dangerously and not do that. So I just have to make sure everything is super lined up really well with pins. I can do it. Okay, so I started at the armpit. I worked my way up this way, and now I'm gonna work my way up this way for only the ungathered area. And one last pin here. And then let's see. Okay, so I've gathered way too much, but that's okay because I can carefully pull out the gathering. And then look, it fits perfect. There, there. Oh, that looks good. I'm gonna stick one more pin in here. Okay. This is exciting. Oh boy, am I gonna run out of bobbin thread? It always comes down to this. Last step, can I make it to the end without running out of bobbin? Okay, let's see. We shall see. Oops. I still have a giant stitch line. Put that back to 3. It's reminding me. Checking to see if I still have stitching and haven't run out of bobbin yet. I think I'm good so far. You see my cheek? Okay. Still sewing. Still sewing. This much left. Yay, I made it. Okay. Well, I still have some bobbin to spare. Look at that. Okay. Let's turn the sewing machine camera off. And turn the whole thing right side out. Oh, how exciting is this? Look at these crazy sleeves. Nice finished neck that I might iron a little bit more. Sleeves are on and big and beautiful, and I don't think it's going to be cropped. I think the length is going to be perfect. Shall I hold it up to me? I've got my crazy glasses on. Maybe it is going to be a little short. Oh well. I will take a picture after I make myself pretty and include it with the live stream. But yay, it's 3 o'clock. We made it. Hopefully you've made yours as well. Ooh, I'm getting some advice about my sewing machine. I love that. I can push the fix button to eliminate the beginning stitch. I knew there had to be a way. I just hadn't looked it up. Thank you so much, Night Angel Rose. That's exciting. And thanks all for being here. Hope you all made some cute tops, or you're going to make some cute tops, because this recording will obviously be up. So if you're just watching and now you're going to go ahead and make yours, good luck. If you have any questions, you know where to find me, and I will see you all next week.